Tewodros II was the emperor of Ethiopia from 1855 until his death. He was born Kasa Haile Giorgis, but was more regularly referred to as Kasa Haile. His rule is often placed as the beginning of modern Ethiopia, ending the decentralized Zemene Mesafint. Tewodros II's origins were in the era of the princes, but his ambitions were not those of the regional nobility. He sought to re-establish a cohesive Ethiopian state and to reform its administration and church. He did not initially claim Solomonic lineage but did seek to restore Solomonic hegemony, and he considered himself the elect of God. Later in his reign, suspecting that foreigners considered him an upstart and seeking to legitimize his reign, he added "Son of David and Solomon" to his title. Tewodros II's first task was to bring Shewa under his control. During the era of the princes, Shewa was, even more than most provinces, an independent entity, its ruler even styling himself Negus. In the course of subduing the Shuans, Tewodros imprisoned a Shuan prince, Menelik II, who would later become emperor himself. Despite his success against Shewa, Tewodros faced constant rebellions in other provinces. In the first 6 years of his reign, the new ruler managed to put down these rebellions, and the empire was relatively peaceful from about 1861 to 1863, but the energy, wealth, and manpower necessary to deal with regional opposition limited the scope of Tewodros's other activities. By 1865 other rebels had emerged, including Menelik II, who had escaped from prison and returned to Shewa, where he declared himself Negus. In addition to his conflicts with rebels and rivals, Tewodros encountered difficulties with the European powers, seeking aid from the British government. Kasa's mother, Woizero Atitajabe I Belawasan, was of the upper nobility, and was originally from Sayant. Her mother Woizatishal was a member of a noble family of Bigemda, while her paternal grandfather, Raswodaho, was a powerful and highly influential figure although generally regarded as a non-royal usurper. Tewodros II would late in his reign claim that his father was descended from Emperor Fasilides by way of a daughter, although most of his contemporaries did not acknowledge the legitimacy of these claims. When Kasa was very young, his parents divorced and Woizero Atitajabe moved back to Gondar, taking her son with her. Not long after their departure, news reached them that Kasa's father had died. Popular legend states that Kasa's paternal relatives split up the entire paternal inheritance, leaving young Kasa and his mother with nothing and in very dire circumstances financially. To make ends meet, it is often repeated that Woizero Atitajabe was reduced to selling kosa, a native herbal remedy used to purge patients of intestinal worms. Kasa would be taunted often for being a kosa seller's son, an insult that Tewodros II seldom forgave. There is actually no evidence that Woizero Atitajabe was ever a kosa seller, and several writers such as Paulus Gogo have stated outright that it was a false rumor spread by her detractors. Evidence indicates that Woizero Atitajabe was fairly well-to-do, and indeed had inherited considerable land holdings from her own illustrious relatives to lead a comfortable life. Kasa's youth was probably not lived lavishly, but he was far from a pauper. Rise to power. Kasa Haile was born into a country rife with civil war, and he destroyed many provincial warlords before becoming emperor. The times were known as the Zemene Mesafint, or Age of the Princes. During this era, warlords, regional princes, and noble houses vied with each other for power and control. They divided the empire into personal fiefs and fought each other continuously. A puppet emperor of the dynasty was enthroned in Gondar by one warlord, only to be dethroned and replaced by another member of the imperial dynasty when a different warlord was able to seize Gondar and the reins of power. Regions such as Gojam and Shewa were ruled by their own branches of the imperial dynasty, and, in Shewa, the local prince went as far as assuming the title of king. Kasa began his career in this era as a shifter, but after amassing a sizable force of followers, was able to not only restore himself to his father's previous fief of Quara but was able to control all of Dembia. Moreover, he gained popular support by his benevolent treatment of the inhabitants in the areas he controlled. According to Sven Rubensson, Kassa shared out captured grain and money to the peasants in Quara and told them to buy hoes and plant. This garnered the notice of the warlord in control of Gondar, Ras Ali II of Yeju. Ras Ali had enthroned Emperor Johannes III, forcing the emperor to marry Ali's mother, the formidable Empress Menen Labanumade. Empress Menen was the true power behind her son and her helpless husband, and it was she who arranged for Kassa of Quara to marry her granddaughter, Tewodros Ali, and the grant to Kassa of the title of Dijazmish. She awarded him all of Yemeru Kemas in the hopes of binding him firmly to her son and herself. Although all sources and authorities believe that Kassa truly loved and respected his wife, his relationship with his new in-laws deteriorated largely because of the disdainful treatment he repeatedly received from the Empress Menen. By 1852 he rebelled against Ras Ali and, in a series of victories, Guramabar, Takusa, Ishal, and Amba Jebeli. Over the next 3 years he handily defeated every army the Ras and the Empress sent against him. At Ishal he captured the Empress Menen, and Ras Ali fled from the rising star and out of history. Kassa announced that he was deposing Johannes III, and then marched on his greatest remaining rival, Dijazmish Wube Haile Mariam of Semyon. Tewodros refused to acknowledge an attempt to restore the former Emperor Saladengel in the place of the hapless Johannes III who had acknowledged Tewodros immediately. Johannes III was treated well by Tewodros, who seems to have had some personal sympathy for him. His views on Saladengel are not known but are not likely to have been sympathetic. Following the defeat of Dijazmish Wube, Kassa was crowned emperor by Abunis Allah III in the Church of Dres Mayim on February 11, 1855. He took the throne name of Tewodros II, attempting to fulfill a prophecy that a man named Tewodros would restore the Ethiopian Empire to greatness and rule for 40 years. Military skills. His military experience started when he served in his half-brother's army. His half-brother died in 1839 and Quara was lost to the family and claimed by Empress Menen of Gondar. Kassa Helu resorted to become a shifter, one who refuses to recognize his feudal lord. Kassa Helu organized his own army in the plains of Quara, when he became too powerful to ignore, as a way to deal with him without using force. He was named Dijazmish of Quara and given the hand of Tawabak, the daughter of Ras Ali of Begemda. In 1845, Kassa was very close to Tawabak and devoted to his marriage, but his submission to Empress Menen was short-lived. In October 1846, he attacked and plundered Dembi, a city located due south of Gondar, and in January 1847 he went on to occupy Gondar. When Kassa unoccupied Gondar later that year, Empress Menen sent an army after him into north of Lake Tana. Kassa easily defeated the army and took the empress as prisoner. Her son, Ras Ali of Begemda, chose to negotiate with Kassa. He gave Kassa all lands west and north of Lake Tana, and Kassa in return released his mother. The reconciled relationship with Empress Menen led him to join up with Ras Ali and Ras Goshi's Uda of Gojam. However, when conflict re-emerged yet again in 1852, Kassa retreated back to Quara to re-strengthen his troops. Reign. Tewodros sought to unify and modernize Ethiopia. However, since he was nearly always away on campaign during his tenure as emperor, disloyal leaders frequently tried to dislodge him while he was away fighting. Within a few years, he had forcibly brought back under direct imperial rule the kingdom of Shoa and the province of Gojam. He crushed the many warlords of Wollo and Tigray and brought recalcitrant regions of Begemda and Simeon under his direct rule. He moved the capital city of the empire from Gondar, first to Debre Tabor, and later to Magdala. Tewodros ended the division of Ethiopia among the various regional warlords and princes that had vied among each other for power for almost 2 centuries. He forcibly reincorporated the regions of Gojam, Shewa and Wollo under the direct administration of the imperial throne after they had been ruled by local branches of the imperial dynasty or other warlords. With all of his rivals apparently subdued, he imprisoned them and their relatives at Magdala. Among the royal and aristocratic prisoners at Magdala was the young prince of Shewa, Salah Mariam, the future emperor Menelik II. Tewodros doted on the young prince, and married him to his own daughter Elitish Tewodros. Menelik would eventually escape from Magdala, and abandon his wife, offending Tewodros deeply. The death of his beloved wife, Empress Tewodros, marked a deterioration in Tewodros II's behavior. Increasingly erratic and vengeful, he gave full rein to some of his more brutal tendencies now that the calming influence of his wife was absent. Tewodros II remarried, this time to the daughter of his imprisoned enemy Tewodros Wube. The new empress, Tewodros Wube, was a proud and haughty woman, very aware of her illustrious Solomonic ancestry. She is said to have intended on the religious life and becoming a nun, especially after the fall of her father and his imprisonment along with her brothers at the hands of Tewodros II. However, Tewodros' request for her hand in marriage was seen by her family as an opportunity to get Tewodros Wube and his sons freed from imprisonment, and so they prevailed on her to marry the emperor. However, while the conditions of their imprisonment were eased, Tewodros Wube and his sons were not released, deeply embittering Empress Tewodros against Tewodros. Already feeling that she had married far beneath her dignity to a usurper, the failure of the emperor to free her family did not help their marital relationship. The marriage was very far from a happy one, and was extremely stormy. They did have a son, Tewodros Tewodros, whom the emperor adored and whom he regarded as his heir. Tewodros, fearful of northerly Muslim powers, wrote a letter to Queen Victoria as a fellow Christian monarch, asking for British assistance in the region. Tewodros asked the British consul in Ethiopia, Captain Charles Duncan Cameron, to carry a letter to Queen Victoria requesting skilled workers to come to teach his subjects how to produce firearms, and other technical skills. Cameron travelled to the coast with the letter, but when he informed the Foreign Office of the letter and its contents, the Foreign Office instructed him simply to send the letter to London rather than take it himself. He was to proceed to the Sudan to make inquiries about the slave trade there. After doing this, Cameron returned to Ethiopia. On Cameron's return, the emperor became enraged when he found out that Cameron had not taken the letter to London personally, had not brought a response from the Queen, and most of all, had spent time travelling through enemy Egyptian and Turkish territories. Cameron tried to appease the emperor, saying that a reply to the letter would arrive shortly. The Foreign Office in London did not pass the letter to Queen Victoria, but simply filed it under pending. There the letter stayed for a year. Then the Foreign Office sent the letter to India, because Abyssinia came under the Rajah's remit. It is alleged that when the letter arrived in India, officials filed it under not even pending. After 2 years had passed and Tewodros had not received a reply, he imprisoned Cameron, together with all the British subjects in Ethiopia and various other Europeans, in an attempt to get the Queen's attention. His prisoners included a missionary named Mr. Stern, who had previously published a book in Europe describing Tewodros as a barbaric, cruel, unstable usurper. When Tewodros saw this book, he became violently angry, pulled the gun on Stern, and had to be restrained from killing the missionary. Tewodros also received reports from abroad that foreign papiers had quoted these European residents of Ethiopia as having said many negative things about him and his reign. conflict with the British Empire. The British sent a mission under an Assyrian-born British subject, Hormuz Rassam, who bore a letter from the Queen. He did not bring the skilled workers as Tewodros had requested. Deeply insulted by the British failure to do exactly as they were told, Tewodros had the members of the Rassam mission added to his other European prisoners. This last breach of diplomatic immunity was the catalyst to Britain launching the 1868 expedition to Abyssinia under Robert Napier. He travelled from India, then a British colony, with more than 30,000 personnel, who consisted of not only soldiers but also specialists such as engineers. Tewodros had become increasingly unpopular over the years due to his harsh methods, and many regional figures had rebelled against him. Several readily assisted the British by providing guides and food as the expeditionary force marched towards Magdala, where the emperor had fortified the mountaintop. When the two sides met at Arija, in the plain facing Magdala, on April 10, 1868, the British defeated the Abyssinian army. With Tewodros' army so decisively defeated, many of his men began to desert and the emperor was left with only 4,000 soldiers. Tewodros had the Europeans freed and sent them to Napier, along with a gift of cattle to be slaughtered for the Easter holiday that was to take place on Sunday, April 12. That year. Napier sent a message thanking him for this peace offering and stating that he would treat the emperor and his family with every dignity. Tewodros II furiously responded that he would never be taken prisoner. The British shelled Magdala, killing most of Tewodros II's remaining loyal men. The emperor committed suicide on Easter Monday, April 13, 1868, as the British troops stormed the citadel of Magdala. He used a pistol which he had used during fighting for unification during the era. Tewodros II was buried by the British troops at Magdala's Medhana Alim Orthodox Church under the name of Theodore II. After his death, the British burned the fortress of Magdala, and departed from Ethiopia. They looted a vast amount of treasure from the citadel, including Tewodros II's crowns, a huge number of both royal and ecclesiastic robes, vestments, crosses, chalices, swords and shields, many embroidered or decorated with gold or silver, hundreds of tablets, the great imperial silver negrite war drum, and a huge number of valuable manuscripts. Many of these continue to be held in various museums and libraries in Europe, as well as in private collections. In burning the mountaintop fortress, they also torched the two churches and town, with the church of Medhana Alim burned. Tewodros II's family later moved the emperor's remains to the Mahidara Salati monastery in his native Kwara, where they remain. The success of the British army was the result of Emperor Tewodros losing the support of most Ethiopians due to his increasingly harsh measures, and also because some of the Ethiopian leaders of the time were more interested in their own political objectives. Prince Kassa, who greatly facilitated the British Army's mission in many ways including opening the way for its travel all the way to Magdala, without any resistance, as well as by making provisions available for procurement as needed by its force. Stanley also provides an account of the meetings between the local chiefs and General Napier, who was able to negotiate his army's travel unchallenged, from the coast to Magdala.